So our agenda today is pretty quick. We are going to go over the just a brief overview of the program as a whole, so you kind of understand its different parts and components. And then we'll go through really what the expectations are of being a coach, as well as having some time at the end for questions. Jumping right in, the Lawns Legumes program started in 2019. We've been going strong for several years now, which is really fabulous. And it's been really fun to watch the program grow. We're continuing to make improvements to the program, but in general, there are these three sort of main components to how the program is structured that are really important to understand the differences. And so one is our public education and outreach campaign, which really is just a lot of our like public facing blue thumb material. It's kind of the way that we can build resources and create more resources that are available for anyone, not just Launch Legumes participants, but anyone who's interested in doing a DIY native plants project. That is where a lot of that work kind of is shown. The second part is the Pollinator Pathways projects, which is an entirely separate kind of grant component that is run by the Board of Water and Soil Resources entirely. They manage that program. They manage accepting grant recipients and generally just going through that process of how that program is set up. They just had grantees apply for that program. I think they started selection processes in June, so people were applying through the spring. That is targeted. They're larger grants specifically for building pollinator corridors in local communities. And so a lot of those grant applicants are usually local government units or watershed districts, sometimes schools, K through 12 schools. We just started opening that up the project opening that up to schools to apply for to hopefully get some more engagement with our youth in Minnesota around native plants and pollinators. So that's a really great program. If you are interested in learning more, recommend going to the Board of Water and Soil Resources website. There's an email contact, I think, there for Erin Leffler, who helps run that program if you know of any organizations interested in learning more. And then the third component is the one that I feel like most people are the most familiar with. You as coaches are probably the most familiar with because it's what you're working in, the Individual Support Grants Program. Bowser, the Board of Water and Soil Resources, has partnered with Metro Bloom's Blue Thumb to help administer the individual support grants side of the Launch Legumes program. So that's what we are working on. We provide, currently it's a $400 grants to individual residents to install native plants and pollinator-friendly plantings in their own yards. This year, we were able to expand the program with some additional funding that we received as a part of the state kind of taking over funding the program. It was previously grant funded through the LCCMR, the lottery funding, but we were able to award both 3,000 grants in the spring and 3,000 grants in the fall, which is huge. It's been very exciting to see the momentum. I think for the fall, we had I think over 8,000 people apply and then award 3,000. So there's still a lot of interest. There are a lot of new people applying every cohort, and so we're looking forward to kind of keeping up this level of engagement and grants that we can get out the door. Just kind of as a little bit of background for the spring, just some kind of wrap up outcomes. We awarded 3,000 grants. We had about 2,300 people accept their grants in the spring. And for coaches, ended up coaching just under 400 grantees, I think, in the spring, which is really amazing. It's just an incredible amount of work that you guys did and getting to connect with so many different community members as they were working towards this. I was doing some kind of back of the napkin numbers crunching earlier and found out that it's about 73% of grantees who worked with a coach completed their projects, which is amazing. That's fabulous. We had And completion is specifically like they submitted for reimbursement in the spring. We had even more who had requested extensions for various reasons. So I think that level of engagement is even higher. And we are currently processing close to 2,000 grant reimbursements as we speak. So it's a very busy time of year for us, but it's also just really exciting to see how successful the program has been, and what more we can do to make it even easier for people to continue to participate successfully. So thank you everyone who was a coach last spring for helping us with that incredible endeavor. As a part of the program, in the spring or the fall, we typically support 4 specific project types that we recommend to grantees to explore as options. So the first and the most popular, I would say, is pocket plantings. These can be any size really of native planting. So it encompasses I feel like the most diverse kind of array of projects grantees could take on. Some of them end up being quite large, along an entire fence line. Others end up being just a few native plants sprinkled into already existing garden beds. So it's a really accessible project that people can adapt to fit their landscape and their capacity during the grant period. The second type of project is pollinator lawns or bee lawns. These are pretty popular plantings, especially for people who aren't quite ready to get rid of more of their turf, or they want to continue to have that green space in their homes and in their landscapes. So these can be done in a couple of different ways, doing an overseeding project, or doing a complete lawn remodel. And we see both with the program. There more and more we are seeing that, and we are encouraging grantees to think really carefully about taking on one of these projects, because the pollinator lawn projects are often very more complex than people expect and take several seasons to do successfully. So they don't, because they often are not using like 100% native plants and having like an excessive like diversity of blooming species, they don't have as high of a value for pollinators. So we just ask, grantees to think about that, but we continue to support grantees who are considering that as a option. The third project type is native trees and shrubs. Installing native trees is honestly a fairly accessible project, because it often is just like someone can select a tree to put on their property, and there is a lot of complexity around choosing where that tree is going to go to ensure its success. But it oftentimes feels a little bit more approachable for grantees who are either new to gardening or are just concerned about the time of prepping an entire yard for a project. The one thing I will say about the native trees and shrubs in the fall, and this is something we know about and our nursery partners know about too, is that oftentimes selection in the fall starts to dwindle in terms of species that are available in nurseries that you can get trees from. So that is something to know will be a challenge this fall. We're working with our native nursery partners always to try and develop more of a supply for the demand that the program is creating. But we've heard that feedback before in the past, and I just always like to lead with that up front for the fall. It can be tricky, but a flowering tree can provide as much forage and pollinator food and habitat as an entire garden. So they can still be a really great option if you can find trees that are available. And then the last project is pollinator meadows. These are really, again, there's no size that determines if something is a pocket planting or a meadow in our books anyway, but we often see pollinator meadows being used on properties that have acres, like an acreage that they want to try and cover with some native plantings, and these are often seeded projects. So they're a little bit bigger, and if people haven't done that kind of work before, I know we often encourage them to think a little bit smaller, think about doing a pocket planting now and planning in the future to add to it to eventually create a meadow. But we always have grantees who are very experienced with doing large seeding projects that end up taking that on, and they can be really beautiful, beautiful projects. With these 4 project types that we kind of promote and encourage, a grantee can do any of them. They could do all of them, although that would be a lot to take on. That's just to say they can mix and match. They don't just have to do one project type. If somebody wants to install a tree and a pollinator lawn with their funding, they are more than welcome to do so. So a quick overview of what our grantees agree to when they accept the grant. Again, it is a cost share of $400, so it is a reimbursement-based grant program currently. We last spring had the opportunity to pilot some voucher funding that we were able to award up front. And some of you may have worked with voucher recipients either in the spring, or we even had one last fall. That's something we're still working with the Board of Water and Soil Resources to kind of continue to support and what that programming could look like. So you may work with a continuing voucher recipient because we have a little bit of funding left to do that, but it's still a fairly small number and a fairly new part of the program. So most people will be requesting reimbursement for their funding and their projects. Grantees agree to maintain their project for at least 3 years, use locally adapted, local origin native vegetation. There are some exceptions to that, which are listed on the website. And then we encourage grantees to think about planting for the full season, to have blooms in the full season. So we strongly encourage trying to get 3 blooming species for each season. Grantees agree to protect their projects from pesticides, submit before and after images and itemized receipts so that we can just confirm that the project was completed and done with plants that are and materials that are eligible for reimbursement. We do maintain a map on our website of all of the completed projects, and we ask grantees if they're comfortable to put a little pin on our map for where their garden is, so we can see the impact that this is having across our state. And then finally, we do ask for a match. And in the spring, we made this change. Instead of it being a certain percentage of the grant amount, we just ask for documentation of at least 2 hours committed to the project, which everyone pretty much automatically gets. The kickoff webinar is an hour long, and it takes over an hour to plan and plant a garden. So we don't ever reject a project for not meeting that requirement. We do just like people to keep track of it so that we can go back and report at the end of the year the outcomes, how many hours people are spending supporting the program by doing the projects, and how much additional money they're putting towards their projects. For this fall, our grantees were notified in June, which was earlier than we've done in the past, and that was to hopefully support people having a chance to plan, or if they already had a plan, getting a chance to plant a little bit earlier. The majority of our grantees have not started their projects yet, and we didn't intend them to. We just wanted to give them more time to start looking at resources and thinking about what they wanted to accomplish this fall. They did already have their kickoff webinar and Q&A webinar in the last 2 weeks. So next week, we'll be hosting on Monday evening a turf alternatives webinar that will be presented by James Wolfen from Twin City Seed, which is great because there's a little bit different considerations for planting a bee lawn in the fall. So he'll be able to get into that in depth for grantees interested in that project. And then on the 30th, over the lunch hour, we'll be hosting a Pocket Plantings and Pollinator Meadows webinar that is presented by 2 of our designers from Metro Blooms Design and Build. We are hoping to have grantees match with coaches by August 9th. That is the ideal for getting the bulk of grantees matched. One thing I will say that we notice every year, but I really noticed last season with the kind of increase in the number of grantees we had is that we also had a pretty significant increase in the second wave of grantees wanting a coach. So they kind of are sent the request form to let us know if they want to be matched, and we work with those people first. And then often a month later, people are starting to get into their projects and they're realizing that they need a little bit more support than they thought, and we get additional requests for coaches. I try to meet those requests as best we can. Obviously, we can't guarantee 100% that everyone will be matched, but I will say, you know, if in the first month or two you are meeting with your grantees and feeling like they're in a really good place and you would be willing to have initial conversations with one or two more, please feel free to email the coaching helpline, L2lcoaching@bluethumb.org, and let me know, because oftentimes we get those requests and it's helpful to have some extra people in my back pocket to match them with. We are hoping to do a mid-season coach check-in in September, but I'll be sending out a poll to kind of ask when is going to work for the most people who are interested to do that. So just be on the lookout for that in your email. And then the deadline for the fall is November 30th. So all of the reimbursement requests should be in by November 30th to complete their projects for this fall. Whew. Moving into coaching and what that really means for the program. So the role of coaches in our program, you know, we're a very small staff. We've added one person to our team. And so now we're like a team of 5 instead of a team of 4 working on this grant program. And we spend a lot of time answering people's questions and trying to be accessible in the helpline and in the Hive. But we can't meet the demands on our own. And so that's where we've found it really important to reach out to coaches and ask for help just supporting grantees. Many of our grantees are first-time gardeners, and so what they're really looking for is someone to provide some just additional advice and encouragement that they really can do these projects. And they often just have a few questions at the beginning when they're feeling like the most overwhelmed. So as a coach, the bulk of your time is often spent right at the beginning of the grant period in your first initial meeting with someone, just providing some of that advice, listening to their plan, encouraging them to maybe think smaller. A lot of grantees come in with really big ideas that they might not be able to accomplish in the grant period. So oftentimes just helping them tailor their project to be successful. And then you know, guiding them back to resources that already exist to help them make their decisions. I would highly encourage you as a coach to become familiar with the eligible expenses, but in particular, the differences in identifying native plants when grantees are purchasing them in garden centers and at native plant nurseries. We know that
if you're watching,
it ends up being the largest portion of our of the reason that we have to either deny a grant entirely or provide less reimbursement than the project was worth, is because people still end up buying cultivars. And occasionally we even have people who say, like, you know, this native nursery staff member recommended this plant to me, or even like this my coach recommended this plant to me and it's a cultivar. And those are always tough conversations for us to navigate and figure out how we can deal with that. So do become familiar with that and really just re-emphasize those points with your grantees from your own experience of trying to shop for native plants. We don't expect you to be the expert on everything, on every project type, on every situation. We do ask you to just use your best judgment as you're guiding residents and trying to answer their questions. The time will come when you probably don't know the answer, or you just haven't had the experience that a grantee needs some advice on. And so you can feel free to reach out to other coaches in the helpline, to other resources that just exist. You can direct them to other resources that you know about. But in particular, feel free at any time to direct a grantee to our helpline, to email ltlhelp@bluethumb.org. we don't necessarily have the answer to everything, but we can almost guarantee that we know someone who will be able to give us an answer. We have a really large network of people who we partner with regularly and want to support this program and are happy to answer questions. So if you're ever feeling like you don't know and your grantee just needs a little bit of extra help, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to help and support in that way. Some of the things that we tell our grantees about getting a coach. Number one is that we remind them as much as we can that you are all volunteers, that you don't necessarily have all the answers, and that you don't have the time or the expectation that you are going out and planting alongside your grantee. You're not doing the manual labor for them. You're not a contractor. You're just there to help answer questions. And so grantees know that. We try and set them up for that expectation. If you're ever finding someone is overstepping those boundaries, please feel free to reach out and let us know. The other thing that we tell them is that they should only anticipate to interact with their coach virtually. We know, we get this feedback all the time, that interacting in person is 100% the preference of both the grantees and coaches. And so when we can match you with someone who is close by and fits your geographic restrictions, we try to do that as best we can. And if you both feel really comfortable going and doing in-person visits together of their garden and walking their site, that is up to you. And if you both feel comfortable, I guess I would say I encourage it. You know, it ends up being a really great community building experience. And we hear the best experiences from coaches who have the opportunity to do that. If you're not comfortable doing that, though, that's okay. And that is why we tell grantees to only expect to interact virtually. We want the opportunity to meet in person together to be the exception and not the expectation for our coaches. We also tell our coaches primarily, not so much our grantees, but that you can expect to spend between 2 and 3 hours per grantee. I feel like that number has been changing a little bit. Maybe in the last couple of years, it's shifted more to 1 to 2 hours per grantee. That has been the average reported from past coaches, but either way, the bulk of that still remains from what I've heard at the beginning, doing that kind of planning meeting with someone. And then the time you spend with your grantee greatly reduces after that. Just doing short check-ins to see how their project is going or if they have any follow-up questions. When we match grantees and coaches, we do send an email now to grantees to let them know that they've been matched with a coach. And that's just to try and increase awareness for them to keep an eye on their email or on their phone for contact from someone they don't know yet, and just to be expecting that first contact. We give coaches the opportunity to reach out first. And that's just so you can kind of prepare yourself, set whatever boundaries that you need on what's going to work best for you. But if grantees haven't heard from you within the first 2 weeks after we send out the assignments, we encourage them to reach out to us and let us know, and then we'll help facilitate that introduction. And typically what that means is I just send an email and I CC both of you and I say, this is your person, this is your coach, and this is your grantee, and you can take it away from there. We did change the form this year so that we are asking this fall, so that we are asking grantees what their preferred form of contact is in case it's not email. All of our program contact goes out to their email, and they do agree to pay attention to that. But I know people still sometimes have an easier time getting a hold of each other if it's via text or a phone call. So we'll be trying to share that information as we gather it with coach assignments this fall. And then finally, we also tell our grantees, you know, we're not guaranteeing that you can be matched with a coach, and you might not have all the answers. Your coach might not be able to answer all of your questions. So we, again, encourage them to look at the additional resources that we provide on our website, to do some, you know, take that
Oh,
on to do some research of their own and to use the Hive, the online community, to ask questions of fellow grantees, check out the grantee guide and become familiar with it and look through the frequently asked questions just so that they're prepared for their own projects. Just a quick note on the virtual site visits and consultations. I know a lot of people are kind of uncomfortable with what this can look like. So we always just like to say there are a lot of really like powerful tools for doing virtual site consultations, using Google Maps or Bing Maps or different satellite views that can show you a property or like the county GIS mapping. You can get a chance to see a property virtually and get kind of an idea of the layout. Um, and Zoom and Google Meet and other, virtual meeting platforms have a lot of really great tools for, annotating an image and looking at it together and kind of collaborating on a plan. We have a video that kind of walks through how to do any of that if you're unfamiliar with it or you just want a refresher, and that's linked in the coaching guide. So you can check that out anytime. Another thing I will say is, in the initial setup of putting together a virtual meeting with your grantee, it's completely okay to ask for a little bit of prep work from them. So sometimes asking for photos of where they're already thinking about installing a project, just so you can look at some things together since you're not there on the property together, can be really helpful as well. The primary focus for the program, of course, is planting native plants, restoring native plants to our landscapes to benefit our native pollinators. So, as you're talking about how can you support at-risk pollinators, we come back to some of the like primary like guidelines for the program. One being planting a mix of at least 3 blooming species in early, mid, and late spring, summer, and fall to ensure continuous availability of food, because we do have pollinators, including the rusty patch bumblebee, that are out foraging sometimes as early as as early as April, all the way through October. And so making sure that while you're getting a diversity of blooms for color and height and those different design considerations, that grantees are also thinking about, what is going to be feeding my pollinators through the entirety of the year. Another thing, people love monarch butterflies. It's one of kind of the faces of our program at this point to support. And I feel like many people now know about the relationship between monarch butterflies and milkweed. But uh, we also want to encourage people to remember that milkweed feeds the caterpillars and the larvae, but it's not the only thing that can feed the adult butterflies. So thinking about adding a diversity of plants for nectar and pollen sources throughout the season is also going to be really important. And there are many different plant lists available on the Blue Thumb website if you want to have something to look at and direct people to. I would encourage you to explore them and to encourage your grantees to take a look at them as well. We also on the Blue Thumb website have what I think is one of my favorite resources, the templates that are specifically put together already for these types of projects, these smaller pocket plantings that are done entirely with native plants and to support pollinators. They take into consideration everything that we've already like talked about and that I know you all are thinking about as you're guiding residents through this process. But it can just be a really great place to visualize what can I do with my space. And if someone's feeling really overwhelmed, you can take a look at the design template and you already have a list, you already have it laid out, you've already had someone think about those bloom periods and design considerations, and you can play around with it if you want, or you can just go ahead and do it straight as it's written. So I know that those are a great resource that get really well used, but I always like to do a little plug for them. We it's just like a little bonus bit of information for coaches. We are planning to create some more of these garden templates into the fall. I'm not sure that they'll be ready for this cohort, but definitely by next cohort, we'll have, I think, 4 more that we'll be starting to add. So you'll see some new ones popping up, which is really exciting. We have resources on our website, of course, for learning to distinguish between natives and cultivars. We will not reimburse cultivars. We will not reimburse nativars. It's just currently not a part of the program. And so it's very important that grantees understand that. One thing that we do say is, you can, if you're starting a garden from scratch or you're already adding bits to an existing garden, if you want to add cultivars to your garden, we're not against them entirely. Like, we're not going to come and rip them out of your garden or tell you your garden is ineligible completely. It's just we can't reimburse for those. So on the grantee guide, this graphic kind of going over native plants versus cultivars exists. And there are also some other examples where people can kind of practice like identifying the differences. And we just encourage your grantees to take a look at that. If you or a grantee is ever concerned about like, is this plant eligible? Feel free to reach out to the helpline. We do ask that people kind of do their own research first, and you can go to Minnesota Wildflowers to see if a plant is native to Minnesota, or the USDA plants database is also a really great resource we use a lot. But if you've exhausted your options and you're still really not sure, feel free to reach out to us, or to encourage your grantee to reach out to us. The grantee guide is kind of the one-stop shop for how to complete a project successfully. It is a web page hosted on our website that goes through kind of the steps that a grantee needs to go through to complete a project, and links to all of our most important and well-used resources. So I encourage you to direct grantees there to kind of start things out. But I also want to give a plug to our plant finder tool, which in March was finally fully updated and released. And it's just become a really excellent resource and a much more powerful tool for people to use to find Minnesota native plants, and that will fit within their different constraints. So you can now search by height and light exposure and bloom color, and you can start getting into soil moisture and ecoregion and a lot of other different like wonderful tools. Also, I think there's like resistance to herbivory. So if someone is having a lot of deer or bunny issues, the number one thing we say is like a fence is going to be the best, but you can also search for some plants that are known to do a little bit better in those high pressure situations. So would encourage you to use that either with your grantees or just for fun. We also made a change to our native nursery partners list. It is now a web page also on the website. So it is listed in the grantee guide. And the number one reason for doing that was so that we could continue to update it. Every cohort, we have new nurseries that show up in the lists and grantees let us know that they were incredibly helpful and in areas that we just haven't had a good outreach success with. And so we want to add them and get them on the list and let people know everywhere that they can shop for native nursery retailers. So that you can explore that webpage, point grantees to it, on top of being filtered by region of the state. You can also see a list of nurseries that do online ordering and shipping throughout the state, which can be a really great option for grantees as well. There's also the Hive. This is another resource for grantees to come and chat with each other and ask questions and generally share. A lot of the times it's just sharing where they're at in their project. They can connect with other grantees in their region. And then we encourage you as coaches to, if you're willing to or interested to explore the Hive, to answer questions as they become available. This is really a community that kind of is what we make of it. And so if we have a really robust and excited group of grantees using it really frequently, it can become a really busy space, but a really incredible space for people to ask questions and share photos. And it's been really fun to have this as available for grantees to use. We also host a Coach Hive page, which is the like same setup, but it's just for coaches. You can go there to ask other coaches questions, or you can ask a question, and sometimes I'm the one that answers. But I can send out in the next email. I'll be sure to send out also the link to access that as well. It's a lot of information. I feel like I just blab and blab about this every time we do this webinar, but we have all of this information in more detail that you can revisit as often as you need to in the coaching handbook. We didn't do any major updates for the fall this year, but if you are using that handbook and noticing that there's anything that would be really useful to you or that you feel needs to be updated to kind of like better express the experience that you've been having as a coach, reach out and let me know. We'll definitely be taking a look at that for next spring and making sure that it's as up to date as possible. Whew, we're at the end here. I almost never have this happen that somebody has just randomly found this Zoom room. But if you are that person for the first time ever and you haven't signed up to be a Blue Thumb coach and you're finally convinced, you can do that at our website. Otherwise, for matching every season, I do send out a Google form just requesting that you confirm that your information is up to date and your location preferences and capacity for each season. So if you haven't filled out that form yet, it was sent out, I believe, in the last email. And if that's not true, it will also be sent up in the follow-up email with the recording of this webinar today. So fill that out. That's who I match people. That's how I know who's getting matched. That being said, I also always miss somebody every season. So if you come, August 14th, realize you haven't gotten an email from me with grantee assignments and you really want to be a part of this, feel free to reach out to the L2L coaching helpline and let me know, and I'll find somebody that needs some help. And then feel free to spread the word just about your experience as a coach and encouraging past participants or other peer members that you think would be really good at this. Let them know about this opportunity. We're always recruiting. And we're also always recruiting for people to apply to the program. Our application period is open for next spring. And so if you haven't applied already because you haven't received a grant already, please apply, let your neighbors know about the program. It continues to be successful just because we have so many Minnesotans who are interested in promoting it and participating in it. And that's wonderful to see.